I talk a lot in my work about the disparity between reality, what it is and how it works, and what it is that human culture says is true about reality. I explain that a good, solid understanding of foundational truth is a prerequisite to being coherent with the truths of reality, which is the very definition of the word sanity. And I explained that the foundational truths of reality are the very simplest and most unbreakable of truths, while human culture holds the position that foundational truth is very mysterious, probably too mysterious for any human being to ever work out. This is a really very huge disparity. The psychology at play here, when it comes to human culture's insistence on itself over and above any progress on our part towards foundational understanding, is that human culture knows it does not know, and does not want to be rendered obsolete. We have all the conspiracy theories in the world, all the deception, manipulation, and betrayal in the world, from what you tell yourself, to what your friends and family tell you, to what the governments, religions, and universities tell you. And it all really does boil down to this level of simplicity. Human culture knows it does not know, and it does not want to be rendered obsolete. Human culture says reality is very mysterious, very subtle, very complex, very difficult to understand. Probably too mysterious, subtle, complex, and difficult for us to ever understand fully. And it's better for you to agree with lots of people who are wrong than to be correct, but all on your own. As far as human culture is concerned, better if we all believe the very simplest truths are unknowable, because then I, human culture, may continue as I always have, which is what I want most in all the world. But really, if the core truths of reality really are all that simple, how on earth can human culture possibly keep us from understanding it? Well, in order to do a consistently reliable job of this, it has to start on you when you are very young, pretty much from the day you were born. It teaches you your ABCs and your 1, 2, 3s. And when these things don't make sense to you, it tells you that clever people have worked out that it does make sense, and that you're just not trying hard enough yet. For a key example of this, let's take a look at what human culture says reality is at the level of basic mathematics. Mathematics is a system that is meant to model reality accurately and reliably enough for us that we may use it to calculate and predict reality accurately and reliably. The mathematicians of the world have not yet agreed amongst themselves on what the truest, most accurate foundation of mathematics can be said to be. But modern mathematics certainly does come in useful when it comes to such things as engineering and calculating debt. So, what is happening at the very simplest levels of our current most widely accepted version of mathematics? What do they teach us as children? Well, if you have one apple and you add another apple, you then have 2 apples. You can do this in advance on paper, and then you can go out into the real world and trust that it will prove to be true. And sure enough, it does. 1 apple plus 1 more apple equals 2 apples. And 2 apples minus 2 apples equals 0 apples. Very good. At some point, while you are dutifully learning your 1, 2, 3s, you will be asked the question, and what do you get if you have 2 apples and you subtract 3 apples? At this point, any coherent child is going to say, well, I can't subtract 3 apples because I've only got 2 of them. To which human culture is going to respond, no, that is the wrong answer. 2 apples minus 3 apples equals minus 1 apple. This is wrong. It's just plain old wrong. Mathematics is meant to model reality. But in reality, the child was correct. If you only have 2 apples, then the most apples you can subtract is 2. Then you have 0 apples and can no longer subtract apples. Human culture will say something along the lines of, yes, it seems counterintuitive, but I will teach you. I will teach you to agree that it is true. And when I have taught you to agree that it is true, you can have a job and be respected by the people in this world. At this point, our relatively coherent child may feel their coherency beginning to wobble, which is precisely what human culture was wishing for. Here is what a coherent system of mathematics says about this situation. And just to warn you, this goes contrary to anything human culture will tell you about how mathematics works. A number, according to me, represents the objective quantity of a subjective quality. This is my definition of the word number. It's the very opposite of what human culture says a number is. But I am a child who is still relatively coherent, still capable of admitting to myself what does and does not make sense to me. So in this particular case, the subjective quality the number 2 is referring to is apples, while the objective quantity it is referring to is how many apples we have here. The quantity of apples we have here is 2, and this quantity is objective because it does not matter who we are or where we are in the world. The number of apples we have here is not affected by who we are and where we are in the world. We have 2 of these things we are calling apples here, and that quantity is the objective truth. The quality of these 2 things we are counting is subjective. I have been calling them apples, while somebody somewhere else may call them pears. What is up to one person is down to another, depending on where they are relative to each other. What is hot for one person is cold to another, and so on. The distance from 0 of the quantity in question is the objective distance from 0 of the quantity in question. And it is this objectivity that causes mathematics to be potentially consistently reliable. If the mathematical system we are using is built solidly on a foundation of truth. And here we come to what is perhaps the most foundational error in modern mathematics. The dictionary definition of a negative number is that it represents a quantity of less than 0. And in the reality that mathematics is supposed to accurately model, there is no such thing as less than 0 of anything at all. None is the absolute very least you can have of a thing. Now, my saying this definitively contradicts the concept of negative numbers, which are foundational to modern mathematics. And negative numbers have been being used quite effectively by human culture for hundreds of years now. So clearly, I must be being insufferably obtuse here, somehow or other. No? Let me help you to understand why I am not being obtuse here. The concept of negative numbers did not come into wide use by human culture until it began to be used as a tool for calculating financial debt. This is a telling enough piece of information in and of itself. One that indicates more about human culture's priorities for itself than it does about human culture's ability to understand and then accurately model reality. What is really happening in a bank account that fluctuates between a positive and negative balance? What is happening is that this bank balance is fluctuating between being in credit and being in debt. And these two qualities of credit and debt are polar inversions of each other. But they are both positive qualities because they are both real and quantifiable qualities. The only reason one can quantify debt is because it is a thing that is present. Or in other words, it is positively present as opposed to being absent. If your bank balance is not exactly zero, then you are either positively in credit or positively in debt. You have a quantifiable amount of credit or you have a quantifiable amount of debt. But whichever one it is, it will be a verifiable distance from zero. Here is what mathematics tries to tell us about reality. That the broken concept of negative numbers keeps us from understanding and appreciating coherently. Any distance from zero, no matter its direction, positively represents the presence of a subjective quality of some form or other. The only reason you can count it at all is because it positively is there. When we take a mathematical model that was specifically designed for the sole purpose of identifying whether one has money or debt, and then try to apply that mathematical model to all the rest of reality, what we are doing is trying to use a one-dimensional system, a single number line of negative to positive, to model a three-dimensional reality. And it is nowhere near sufficient to that task. The reason the square roots of negative numbers cannot be calculated is because negative numbers do not exist in reality. They do not correspond to anything in actual reality. The easiest way, I know, for me to illustrate exactly what I am talking about here is to use the good old colour sphere to show how reality works in 3 dimensions, and therefore how mathematics models reality when it actually does have a foundation based in reality. The colour sphere, like reality, has 3 dimensions to it. There is the luma, which defines how much light is present, leading towards white in one direction and black in the other. There is the saturation, which defines the intensity of whichever given colour we are quantifying. And there is the hue, which accommodates the full spectrum of colours. And the whole affair is centred on a 0 point of equilibrium. That is a perfect mid-grey. What I love about the colour sphere is that it shows so simply and cleanly that regardless of which direction we move from the 0 point at the center, we get a quality. Maybe we move towards black, maybe towards white, maybe red or green. In the color sphere, there is no direction away from 0 that can possibly lead to less than 0. There are no locations in the color sphere for the square roots of negative numbers, because there are no negative numbers in the color sphere. And there are no negative numbers in the color sphere because the color sphere models a quality of actual reality. And there are no negative numbers in actual reality. There are only positive qualities that are polar inversions of each other. 3 dimensions gives us 6 polar partners, not 2. Having only 2 polar partners, whether we call them positive and negative or whatever, in our mathematical model may help us to calculate debt and build rocket parts, which is fine enough so far as it goes, but it is nowhere near enough to model actual reality. Nowhere near enough to help us understand reality. The reason mathematicians cannot calculate the square roots of negative numbers is because negative numbers are a broken concept in the first place, born of trying to apply a one-dimensional abstract model to a 3-dimensional actual reality. And this is all a much bigger shame for us than you might at first suspect. What does it really matter? You might reasonably ask. If it's true that negative numbers are only a useful hack, what does it matter, so long as they are useful? Well, when it comes to calculating debt and building rocket parts, perhaps it doesn't matter too much. But here's the big thing, and it really is a very big thing. Not being correct about the very, very simplest truths of reality means that we are essentially, fundamentally, foundationally incorrect about everything else we think about reality. Whereas, when we do have a model of reality that is actually correct at the foundational level, we can then look at that model and see how reality works. So the knowing of something very, very simple can solve questions that have been just huge for humankind from the beginning, such as, why does existence even exist at all? Our great thinkers tie themselves up in knots trying to work out the square roots of negative numbers and whether human existence is the result of an all-powerful God or of blind energetic forces of the cosmos. They've been doing this for thousands of years and are as far away from having a simple and verifiable answer as ever. You absolutely have to get the very simplest things correct first, before you can advance to the more complex stuff. And here is the foundational case in point. When mathematics is correct, it is modeling things that are true. It is modeling truths of reality. This is the only reason it is at all useful in the first place. So what does the correct mathematical model that does not contain negative numbers and does inhabit a three-dimensional working space tell us about reality that our broken modern mathematics does not? It tells us this: the absolute very least that existence can be reduced to is a 0 point of equilibrium. There is literally no such thing as nothing. Now hold on, you might possibly say, yes, there is. It's right there in your three-dimensional model, right at the center. 0. Nothing. What are you talking about? This 0 at the center of the color sphere is not at all an indication that there is no quality of existence present at this location. It only tells us what the quality is. In the case of color, if that is the quality we are quantifying here, the quality of the color to be found at this location of the color sphere is a perfect mid-gray. And a perfect mid-gray is no less of a quality than a shocking pink or a vinyl black. A perfect mid-grey is no more nothing than a grass green or a brilliant white is nothing. In order to precisely and correctly model and understand any quality of reality using mathematics, one must model that quality using three-dimensional mathematics, because all reality takes place within 3 dimensions. And what a three-dimensional mathematical model, such as the color sphere, shows us is that there is no less than nothing, no negative numbers, only equilibrium and the potential contrasting qualities that extend outwards from equilibrium. Correct mathematical principles are not invented, they are discovered, because they are truths that were there all along, even before we were consciously aware of them. And the reason these truths were there all along is because They just are true. Always have been and always will be. Because they just cannot not be true. And when we get our mathematical model correct, when we identify its true and actual foundation, the truth can speak to us at long last. The truth can speak to us at long last. How beautiful does that sound? For the longest time, throughout all remembered and misremembered human history, we have been asking and searching and struggling and straining to find and understand the truth. The truth of existence in general, and very much the truth of ourselves in particular. The truths of existence cannot help but be true, which means that existence cannot help but exist. And the truth of this has been the blind spot of human culture for as long as we can remember. We have science culture, religious culture, occultism culture, metaphysics culture, and on and on. But all of our culture has failed to understand the very simplest and most foundational truths first. This isn't a criticism. It's just an understandable but demonstrable fact. And now human culture has grown very comfortable with its own existence and does not at all wish to start undoing itself in order to accommodate the foundational truths that would help it to be an expression of actual existential truth. The concept of negative numbers and our reliance on them is a bigger problem for us all than pretty much anybody I talk to about it so far appreciates. But it really is a huge problem for the world, for humanity, because we cannot benefit from the truth while we are resolutely unwilling to let go of the hack. And human culture itself is the hack that human culture itself is unwilling to let go of. And here is the truth that human culture does not wish for any of us to entertain, because human culture, the hack, does not wish to be rendered obsolete by the truth that human culture became the hack for. There is no non-existence for existence. This is what the fallacy of negative numbers hides from us. The religious are happy to have blind faith in the eternal nature of their God, without understanding how anything should be caused to be eternal. And our schools of physics are happy to observe that energy can neither be destroyed or created, but only transformed, without any actual understanding of why this should be so. It is so because there is no such thing as negative numbers, no such thing as less than zero of existence. Only an equilibrium that one moves towards, dwells within, or moves away from. The truths that cannot not be true do not only apply to colours. The truths of existence apply to all of existence, because they are the truths of existence. And this is all there is for all of existence. An existence that leads in and out of equilibrium and nowhere else, because there is nowhere else there. This is all there is for existence. And if you exist, then you are existence. And this is all there is for you, because the truths apply to you just as much as they do to anybody or anything else. Our cultures only want more of themselves, and they are doomed to not have that. While we will only ever have more and more and more of us, because death, non-existence, it just isn't there for us to have. It just isn't there. It isn't anywhere. This is why and how it is that we should be the eternal. Not because it is a reward we earned, but only because it is a truth that cannot ever be escaped. And so it is that the feeling better rather than worse of being coherent with the truth that human culture definitively denies us should be so very valuable to us when we do have the truth speak to us at long last and tell us exactly what and who we are. You are equilibrium. You exist, you exist, you exist, you exist.